Yay, I'm so excited to do this today, work on some vocab with you. Are you ready to do this?
I'm so ready. This looks like a fancy setup you got going.
Well, it is kind of a fancy setup because it is my fancy way that I like to tell, students when you're kind of struggling to organize or kind of put everything together, flashcards are the way to go. Having said that, these aren't just basic flashcards. As you can see, they're flashcards, what I like to call flashcards plus, meaning I want you to go beyond just oh, here's the word, here's the definition. We want to use every flashcard as an opportunity to really dig deeper into the meanings and the understanding of a word. So what you're going to see on your screen, like right now, you see a flashcard with a word on it. And imagine if I'm doing it digital, but if you decided to print it, if you're not doing digital, imagine this is the front of the flashcard. And you'll see at the bottom, there's 4 prompts because when you're looking at the flashcards, once you fill them out, or if you are even if you filled it out and then you're going to look back at them later, what you're going to see is you're going to say, okay, here's my word at the bottom. Here are the 4 things I need to do. And then on the back, you fill it out or you check what you've just said. Does that make sense? Kind of like you're making your own flashcards.
I like it. I
All
like
right. So let's start for this first word, a state for years. Let's go with this one. Okay, so this estate for years. There are 4 steps that you would take with this word or any word, and you see them at the bottom there. The
hmm
first step is you're going to categorize it. And you'll see we'll fill it out on the next page. But by categorize, what I mean is what chapter does this belong in? Like what chapter, what lesson did you learn about a state for years? And the reason you're doing that is because when you get your vocab, as you increase it, when you've got 4 choices, if you can say, oh, this is a word about finance and the question's asking me about zoning, then you could eliminate it. So
hmm
do you get what I'm saying? Because usually it's
Yeah.
multiple, I like to say multiple guess instead of multiple
Yeah.
choice, but multiple guess. If you can get rid of one of your answer choices, then now you've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right instead of a 1 in 4 chance if you have no idea what the question's asking. I'm hoping
hmm
that's not ever the situation, but if it is, this can help narrow down some answer choices. So the
hmm
first thing you're going to do is categorize. The second thing you're going to do is define the word. But when I say define the word, what I mean is not the book answer that you might have memorized or just a couple of words or a phrase that you're like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of what it means." I mean explain it. How would you explain it simply to a 10-year-old? Put it in your own
hmm
words so that it makes sense. Our third step is to connect it. Now, you'll find your third step and your fourth step you might want to do one before the other. But when I say connect it, what I want to know is, okay, what other things in real estate are connected to it? So we're talking about estate for years, but I'm sure, just off the top of your head, you could be like, oh, yeah, there's also estate for will and things like that. Like
hmm
connect it into the big circle of real estate. And then this fourth step is make sure you know why it's important. Make sure you know why is your commission having you learn this word. How could this mess up? How could this, show its ugly head, or it could be beautiful head, I don't know. But how could it pop up once you are in the real estate business? When would you see it? Why is this thing important? Because in my mind, there's nothing worse than somebody telling you just to memorize it simply because you have to memorize it. Now, are there some things that do fall in that category? Yes. Like if I ask you how many square feet in a mile in a acre, then you would say 43,560. I know we have people memorize that, but I'm like, you know what? Google. It's kind of like your teacher back in the day be like, you'll never have a calculator in your hand all the time. Actually, there
Actually, yeah.
like there's no reason why you can't Google 43,560, but it's a number all of us have memorized in this real estate world. So I guess
Yeah.
I don't know. I got enough. But having said that, let's fill out our first flashcard, a state for years. So we said what we were going to do. Number one is categorize it by like what chapter. So do you happen to know what topic, what chapter? estate for years falls under?
The categorizing them, I know is going to be a bit difficult because I haven't. It's been a little bit since I took the class, so I haven't been.
Well,
I
you know
can't
what?
just
And
remember the chapter.
that's a good point. So this is just the first page. These are some of the topics that I've broken it down into. So we'll review those
Oh,
really quickly. You got agency, you have estates, interests, and ownerships, fair housing laws, public land use laws, environmental laws, contracts and deeds, leasing, property descriptions, real property valuation, finance, taxes and assessments, closings, real estate investings, real estate math. Now, that's not an exact science, but you can kind of see where almost everything you learned would kind of fall in one of those categories, correct?
mm-hmm.
So we're talking about estate for years. Where do you think which category do you think this would go in?
The interest, estates, ownerships.
Yeah. So we're going to call it ownership, but I'm also going to put it under leasing. And we'll talk about why when we talk about connecting it and its importance. So, could you define estate for years? Is that something you can do off the top of your head?
I have just the textbook version. I right now I really want to get it to get better at putting it into
Yeah.
making it
So tell
more
me your
simple.
textbook version.
It's a having owning a house or for a fixed period of time, right?
Yes. Okay. So what I love about what you said is fixed period of time. But you said owning a house for a fixed period of time. And an estate for years isn't about owning, it's about
Leasing.
leasing. So it's a lease for a fixed period of time.
Okay.
Right. And what I mean by that is there's a definite start date, there's a definite end date, and there is no auto renew. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so let's connect it. We're talking about an estate for years. And this connection period, I want to make sure we understand like where this falls. Now, I put it in ownership because I shortened ownership estates, interests
Hmm.
because it's an estate. So one of the words that I would connect this to is estate, which do you happen to know the definition of the word estate?
Not at the top of my head at the
That's
moment.
okay. Well, what it means is you can live there. It means you can live there. And we also know that there's two types of states. You got your freehold estates, and then you've got your non-freehold estates. Do you happen to remember what freehold or non-freehold means?
Isn't freehold owning
Yep.
without a lease and then non-freehold is leasing?
Yeah, because it's a leasehold is the other word. So where do you think estate for years would go? Under freehold or non-freehold?
Non
All right.
wait, yeah, non-freehold, sorry.
No, what? No, it goes under non-freehold because you are leasing.
Leasing.
And
Yeah.
then there's four types of non-freehold estates. One of them is estate for years. Do you happen to remember any of those other ones?
3 years. I'm blanking.
That's okay. Estate for period to period, which can also be called like a periodic estate. You have an estate at will and an estate at sufferance. So in this section with connect, What I'm trying to get you to do is say, okay, you may know what an estate for years is, but I want you to see the bigger picture of like where
Yeah.
it fits in the puzzle. Does that kind of gel what I'm saying there?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like this will is very helpful just being able so when you see the questions, you can be like, oh, I remember this goes with this and kind of like piecing it together like a puzzle.
Exactly. So when we're looking at it, we know just quickly, because although the word we're looking at is estate for years, this is a great time if you're connecting to learn some more. So when you're doing these flashcards, what you can do is if you're like, oh, I got to state for years and I got to state at will, and I know there's two other ones, but I don't know. Great. It's an opportunity to look it up so that you can kind of fill out the
Hmm.
rest of it. And then once you do fill it out, make sure you know what it means. So if an estate for years means you can live there and there's a definite end date at the end of the term, which is what the synonym is for that, estate for years, estate for term. At the end of the term, you got to go. Just like if somebody's been voted mayor or something, at
Hmm.
the end of that term, you go unless you get voted again. If it was something like a vacation rental, at the end of your vacation rental, you got to go. You don't get to just be like, oh, yeah, I thought I was going to stay another 2 weeks. No, your term is over. You're done. Oh, and now I'm going to have to delete that in our thing.
I got scared. I thought that was me for a second. I was like, oh.
No, that was not you. I'm gonna delete at this point. I'm just making a note and I'm turning off my phone because of course I am. All right. So yes, like a state for years, no automatic renewal. The state for period to period. The difference is it would automatically renew at the end of the period. So have you ever rented an apartment and what they'll say is, hey, your lease is coming to an end. You've been here for a year. And unless you tell us you're going to move out, we're just going to put you in next year's lease.
Yep.
That's an estate from period to period. It's just like, yep, it's going to roll into a whole new lease period. And at the end of that period, it's going to roll into another lease period until either they end and they're like, yeah, your apartment's gone, or you're like, nope, I don't want to stay here anymore.
Hmm.
So that's the difference. It's about that automatic renewal. An estate at will is like when your best friend comes or a family member comes. If your sister's like, hey, I need to come and stay with you for a couple months, if you have a sister, then you know there's not an exact date she's going to get there. And we definitely
Yeah.
know when family comes to move in, we don't know exactly when they're going to leave.
Yep. Yep.
So it's just, it's kind of willy nilly. There's no exact start date,
Yeah.
there's no exact end date. And then you have an estate at sufferance. And an estate at sufferance is when you had the right to be here. Notice this is the one that's not connected, and I did that for a reason. You were in an estate for years, an estate from period to period, or a periodic tenancy, it can be called. You're in an estate at will, and you're supposed to leave, but you don't. Now the landlord has to suffer you through you staying until they get a summary ejectment. They basically evict you, an unlawful detainer is basically an eviction in some states, but they have to go through the right court actions to get you out. And until they do those right actions, you have the right to stay there, even though your lease is over. That is an estate at sufferance. So, in the big picture, does that kind of help you place where this vocab goes?
Yes. Making
Now
like
to
a connect the dots. Like that's
yeah,
kind of what I'm doing.
connect the dots. Now, unrelated but somewhat related, do you remember any of your freehold estates?
Oh goodness. Not off the top of my head,
Well,
no.
and that's okay. And this is what I want you to do when you're doing your cards. I don't want the vocab word to stop at define. I want you to go, oh yeah, there was a state and I know what that means. And then I know there's non-freehold estates and here it goes. And then if you wanted to, you could be like, oh yeah, I've got a fee simple. Absolute. And then you have your fee simple defeasibles. And then you have your life estate, which includes the Porotry V. And we're not going to go over all of that right now, but next time you go to do this flashcard word, when you're thinking about connecting, yeah, we're talking about an estate for years, but would you agree everything in the connect box area
Hmm.
actually relates somehow? Because I could have said connect. I guess I could have said relate. Do you see how it all kind of relates and fits
Yeah.
together like a puzzle piece?
Yeah, it's just like
And
in the umbrella with everything.
yes, and
Yeah.
that's what I want you to be able to do. And then you can also, even though we're talking about estate for years, it's a good way to test your knowledge on your freehold estates. I mean, you could connect this out as far as you wanted to. I'm going to stop right here so we don't run out of time, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, the last step, step 4, is why is this important, or where is this going to come up in real estate life? Why is this important to you?
It's when you got like knowing your clients, what they're planning on, what
Exactly.
they plan on doing.
It's about your clients, especially if you are a property manager or if you decide to ever own property. Isn't there a big difference between saying, hey, you can stay here for 6 months and then you got to get out
Hmm.
versus you can stay here and then, we'll look at it again sometime in the future? What I think about when I think about this is when people are buying and selling houses. And sometimes the seller's like, okay, I need more time. Buyer, go ahead. You can buy the house on January 15th, but you're going to let me stay for a month afterwards. That is a great time for an estate for years versus an estate from period to period. If you're the buyer, you're like, oh, yeah, I can give you 30 days. I can give you from January 15th to
Hmm.
February 15th. But on February 15th, guess what? You got to go.
Hmm.
Right. So that kind of, and I'm going to call it a sale leaseback, even though that's more of a commercial term. But I think it gives the idea of where you might see this in real life. You want to make sure that that seller, especially if you're the listing agent, has an estate for years, or the buyer's agent. You want that estate for years. You want that seller to get out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my hope for importance is to make it more real.
Yeah.
Did that example kind of give it more, a little bit more real to you? Like why you
Hmm.
might actually say, great. All right. Also, I know I'm crazy, but I'm sick of blue. So we're going to change to green. Our
Nothing wrong
next
with that.
word. Hey, you got to spice it up a little bit in this world.
Exactly. Hmm.
In fact, I don't even want to do green. I think I want to do pink.
Oh, you read my mind. Pink's my favorite
See,
color.
I mean, it's pink. Pink and green are my sorority colors, so I have to love it. I don't
Uh,
have to. I just do love it because. All right. So, Lien Theory. Again, when you're doing these on your own, whether it's when you're creating them or you're reviewing them, and I'll send you this file because you've been so lovely to let me record you today.
oh, thank you.
However, when you do these for yourself, whether it's again beginning or reviewing, you're going to do your 4 steps. We're going to categorize, we're going to define, we're going to connect, we're going to talk about why is it important.
Hmm.
So, first one, categorize. Do you have any idea where Lien Theory goes? What chapter you would have
I
learned it in? Can you think
am
of?
not.
Okay, that's okay. Strangely enough, it goes in finance.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I'm going to assume, well, I'm not going to assume. You tell me, do you know what Lien Theory is?
Um, I kind of just broken down what is it? The lender takes the title,
You
or is it
opposite.
backwards?
It's backwards. So you're
Okay.
thinking of another word. There is one where the lender slash the trustee takes title, but that is title theory.
Ah, yeah.
What is lien theory? What's the opposite of that?
So it'd be the borrower.
Yes.
Borrower takes title, and then the lender uh holds agency, something along those lines.
So in the mortgage situation, the borrower retains title. So what we mean by that is I like to think of title theory like a car, like having
Okay.
a car loan. Because when you have a car loan, it's not your car until you pay it off.
Hmm.
And title theory states that's how the home loan works. You buy the house, and then you turn around and you give legal ownership or legal title to the bank in the form of a trustee. And that's where that whole deed of trust comes in. And then when you pay the bank off, just like with a car, they give you title to your home back. And lien theory states it doesn't work like that. Lien theory states you're the seller. You're the buyer. You buy the house. You get title using a general warranty deed. And then you keep title. All the bank does is put a lien on your home. Why is that important? And I know I'm skipping to importance, but why would that be important as the bank? Why would a bank maybe want to choose title theory over lien theory or lien theory over title theory?
Um,
Think about foreclosure.
would like the client, their would it be like have to do with like their financial standing in a sense? Like what does that?
No. Well,
I'm lost down my
that's
own
okay.
train
No,
of
that's
thought.
okay. And this is what helps you. I'm glad. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm glad you're lost, but if all you did is you realize that, oh, the lien theory, the borrower gets to keep title to the house, like that's one way to look at it, but there are implications. So let's say
Mhm.
you're the bank. If you have a house in a title theory state, it's your house, just like with a car. If your car is going to be repossessed, do they have to call you up and be like, hey, we're coming at 7 a.m. to take our car back? No.
Nope.
Why can banks come and get their car?
It's the bank, they're the big guys. Like
It,
you owe money,
it,
they're
it,
gonna
it's their car, right? The
yeah.
bank can come and get their car because they're repossessing their car. So they don't have to wait for a judge. If your car was being repossessed, they don't have to take you to court in order to get your car
Mhm.
because they own the car. So that's like title theory. In a title theory state, there is no judicial foreclosure, meaning it's faster. It is faster for the bank to foreclose. Does that make sense why that would be true?
Mhm.
So, what does that mean for lien theory state if the house doesn't belong to the bank? What are they going to have to do in order to be able to sell somebody else's property?
They'll have to go through the judicial.
Yeah. So, a title theory, and I don't know if I just wrote it wrong or said it wrong. Title theory state is non judicial foreclosure. They don't have to go through the courts. And then lien
Mhm.
theory is, oh, I see what I need to do here. I'm like, why is my notes not making sense? I'm going to say, ah, yeah, stop it. It is non-judicial foreclosure. I think I was saying before it is not judicial, but either way. And then lien theory is judicial foreclosure. which means they go to a judge. And one of the things I like to point out is in the Great Recession, so 2008, 2009, 2010, some states like Florida, which is a lien theory state, people would be foreclosed upon in 2009, April of 2009. You get a notice of foreclosure. But because they have to wait for a judge to do this, they
Hmm.
sometimes stayed in their house for 8 months, 9 months, over a year, even though they hadn't paid, simply because they couldn't do anything until they could get a court date.
Hmm.
So is that going to affect how people are going to live in their houses and what happens when they pay? Like, that's a big deal.
Hmm.
Yeah. So title theory versus lien theory. And if I were to think of other words, I think another word that we talked about would be, and I'm just going to highlight it, non-judicial foreclosure is a word that might come up on the test. Judicial foreclosure, obviously title theory. But another one might be, and I just had it in my head, oh, deed of trust or trust deed. Because that's what transfers ownership to a buyer in a title theory state.
Yes.
Now, when you go back to, because of course you're going to watch this, but if you were to make this card, let's say you pulled up this card for review and you got lien theory. And let's just play devil's advocate and you can't remember anything about it. When you go to reread this card in your handwriting, not my terrible handwriting, when you look at the definition and its importance and its connection, will that help kind of anchor it to
Hmm.
in your brain some more? I don't want you to just do the definition. I want you to anchor it around some other vocab.
Oh yeah, no, this is definitely gonna help because I tend to just have those blank moments, especially in the mornings. I'm just like, oh,
That's okay.
okay. Yeah.
No, and that is perfectly okay because you never know. What if you end up taking your exam in the morning? You got to get used to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you. I am not a morning person either. I know we are doing it way early for you in the morning. So, yeah,
It's okay.
that's
Got me up and going.
hey, that's okay. All right, let's do our next word. Ooh, equity. That's a good word. I like this word, equity.
I don't know why. I just really don't like this word because I
Okay.
always just get so confused. Like I
Hmm.
get I don't
Okay.
know. I just
Do you know what chapter it belongs in?
sorry, my Siri went on for a second.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, sorry. It's like Lalexa, who's real nosing.
Yeah, she's always listening.
Right. And now she's figured out when I put the L in front, I'm still talking about her. She still popped on over here. So, any chapter, any chapter you can think about here, like you know what chapter it belongs to?
Would it be in the financing?
Yes, it is in finance. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but I do think I have a visual that will help you with this. Let's see if I can find it.
A few moments later.
Okay, so this is the thing I wanted to find. And this is all about equity because although I could explain it to you in words, sometimes I think the visuals are more helpful. So
Hmm.
let's pretend you buy a house and you pay $100,000 in cash. Well, let me first define equity. Equity is your money in something. I'm going to call it in a house. Meaning, if you sold it tomorrow, how much of that money could you keep versus how much of the money could you give to the bank? So, if you bought a house for $100,000 cash and you had to turn around and sell it tomorrow for $100,000, how much of that money would be yours? $100,000,
Yeah.
right? That's your equity. Equity is the money that you would get to take home because it's yours and you don't have to pay it out to somebody else.
Okay.
So in that first scenario, scenario number one, If you paid $100,000 cash for a house that's worth $100,000, then your original equity is $100,000. You didn't make any kind of new equity. I mean, it's only been a day. So your total equity is $100,000. I think that's good. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty
Cool.
self-explanatory. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's look at day number 2. Let's say, or situation number 2, you buy the house for $100,000. 3 months later, Jason Momoa moves in next door. Not your house, because then I'd have to kill you for moving in with my TV husband.
He
movie husband.
he is my
But
lover. Yeah.
okay, no, he's mine.
This is awkward.
No, we're gonna break into song "The Boy Is Mine" by Brandy. But he moves in next door. Okay, maybe we won't fight over Jason Momoa. Let's talk about I don't know. Let's just use Oprah. All right. Oprah
great
moves
gal.
into the neighborhood. Would you agree property values are about to go up?
Yes.
All right. So in this scenario, on day 1, you bought the house for $100,000 cash, which means on day 1, your original equity would be $100,000 if you sold it the next day. But if 2 months later Oprah moves in, you might get $40,000 in appreciation. Your house is worth $40,000 more simply because somebody might be able to peer over the fence and have a conversation with Oprah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you sell it after that, you would actually take home a check for $140,000. Your total equity after it was worth $140,000 would be $140,000. You would get to take every single penny of that home because you don't owe the bank anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the breakdown of that is $100,000 is original equity, but $40,000 of that was new to you equity. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's try a new scenario. You buy a house, it's worth $100,000, but shockingly, you don't have $100,000 in cash. What? You did,
No.
however, save up $20,000 as a down payment. So if you put down $20,000, where are you going to get that other $80,000 from?
The lovely bank.
The bank. So that's what you do. You put down $20,000, but then you borrow $80,000. 2 days later, you win the lottery. You're like, I'm out of this house. So you sell it. When you sell the house for $100,000, do you get to pocket all $100,000 you sold it for?
No, because you got to pay back your loan.
So that means you would only pocket $20,000. That $20,000 is your equity. Your original equity was $20,000 because that is the money you didn't owe to the bank.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, yes?
Yes, the dots are connecting.
Yay! Well, let's talk
Oh,
about
and
what
so
could
much.
happen then in situation 4. What if you bought the house for $100,000 and you put down $20,000 to begin with? Would you agree that means your original equity is $20,000? Are you with me so far?
Yes.
On the way home, you buy a scratch off. You win $30,000. Woohoo! And being the responsible adult you are, you're like, you know what? I'm going to put this towards my house. So when you started this day and you were leaving the closing, you would have started with an $80,000 loan.
Mm-hmm.
You started with this $80,000 loan, but then you paid down your loan by $30,000. Because you're like, well, this is $30,000 I won't have to pay interest on.
Mm-hmm.
So originally you had $20,000 in equity, but would you agree by paying down that 30 with that cash, you have a new $30,000 in equity?
Mm-hmm.
So your total equity at the end of the day would actually be $50,000. You started with 20, but then you paid it down by 30,000, so that's you have 50,000 in equity. And that's what happens every time you make a mortgage payment, a PITI payment. Even though it's PITI, every payment is going to have this principal. And that makes your balance go down so that your equity goes up. How does
That
that
makes a
feel?
lot more sense.
Well, I could do number 5 with you, but I mean, it's just me adding the appreciation and it's adding the paying down the loan at the same time. But
Hmm.
the just making sure that we understand your down payment is your original equity. And then you get new equity either by paying down your loan or the house appreciates. It just depends.
Hmm.
But there's your visual. Are you feeling, and
Yes.
do you see how it kind of connects to your principal payment? And every time you make a payment, the principal lowers. So
Yes.
having
Yeah.
said that, oh, that's what I want. Could you now define equity? And it could be your words. What is equity? If you were explaining this to yourself later or explaining to a 10 or 12-year-old later, how would you explain it?
It's just your money, like
Yeah,
your money in your home.
it's your money. That's not the
Hmm.
bank's. So when you make your flashcards, that's one of the big things. You can buy pre-made flashcards, and I don't hate them, but I don't love them because I mean, I could look up on Google what a definition for equity is, but you can bet your bottom dollar because I'm obviously Annie today, but you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be some fancy definition, but that's not helping you. You just needed to know,
Yeah.
oh yeah, equity is the money that didn't that doesn't belong to the bank. Okay.
Yeah. No,
So,
I like feel like just making your own because then you get to do all the colors and just make it your own
yes.
way. And I
And
just like it.
hopefully adding the other things, the connection and the importance helps it stick to your brain.
Hmm.
Have I ever told you my theory on learning and how information goes in and out of your brain?
I don't think so.
Okay, we're going to draw this out even though you know I'm a terrible draw. So, imagine your brain is a foam pit. You know, like you go jump in one of those foam pits and there's all
Hmm.
these foam pieces and they look like that, right? You know what I'm talking about? And then you jump in. Well,
Yeah.
imagine that's in your head and here's your ear. Right? I feel like information goes in your ear and then does your mom say, and then it goes right back out. Like you heard your mom say that or somebody say, I'm just saying
Yep.
something. Right. Well, I think information does. In fact, there's a study that talks about the curve of forgetting. Have I ever shown you the curve of forgetting?
I'm not sure.
I don't think I have. Let's see. The curve of forgetting here. Now, this isn't me. This is a guy, and I'll erase it so you can see it better. This is a study that was done like in the early 1900s, and then other studies have backed it up. But long story short, when you learn something, you know 100% of it, right? But then 20 minutes later, you're only remembering about 60% of it. And then if you go an hour later, you're only remembering about 44% of it. And if you go 9 hours later, you probably only remember about 35% of it. A day later, you got 33%. 2 days later, 27%, 25. Like it goes down.
Hmm.
Well, if you want to remember more, then review it. Because look, if you review within the first 18 to 20 minutes, well, an hour later, you remember 60% instead of 44%. And then 9 hours later, you're going to remember more like 50% instead of 30. What if you review the information a day later? Well, then you know it. But then 2 days, the day later, you're going to remember so much more. Like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's not, I tell people it's not you. It is really a true thing. Stuff really does go in one ear and out the other.
Hmm.
What you're trying to do is imagine that these have arms. This is a hand, two, three, four, five, right? And this is a hand. 1, 2,
Mhm.
3, 4, 5. Okay, they're chicken arms, whatever. So when information comes in, now choose a different color here. When a piece of information comes in, there's all this stuff. All of a sudden, bloop, bloop, something can stick.
Mhm.
And then the rest of it, some of it's just going to fall, but some of it is going to fall out the other side.
Yeah.
The information that sticks is information you already know, like the stickiness of it. So if I tell you a lyric to a song is I'm trying to think of a good one. America I'm trying to think of a good example. Like if I tell you there is another lyric to the Spangled Banner, you might
Mhm.
be able to remember it better because the song is the Star Spangled Banner.
Mhm.
But if I tell you, hey, there's this song that you've never heard before, and here's the lyric, what are the chances you're going to remember the lyric?
Pretty slim.
Right. So this is your Star Spangled Banner, right? Okay, stop that. There we go. That's your Star Spangled Banner. That is, if I tell you that it relates to the Star Spangled Banner, it because there's a relation there, it's a little bit more sticky than a piece
Mhm.
of information that doesn't relate to your head. And that's where the connections and the importance comes in. I know that is a crazy analogy, but does it make sense?
No, yeah. Oh, when I was taking the classes, one of the professors told us when you see riparian rights are river. That's just like always just since he said that it's just stuck with
Yeah,
me. It's
because
so yeah, that's what it
riparian,
makes.
yeah, riparian is a word you know, river. And so
Mhm.
that is the word, like you know, river. So that information sticks. But if you
Yeah.
don't know the word river and riparian, then it's got an easier time falling out of your head.
Mhm.
Okay. So that is what we're trying to do with the connections, and the importance is we're trying to make it stickier. We're trying to give those foam blocks some arms. Also, I think those are probably great places for people to get diseases. But okay.
I agree. Some
I'm
lice.
like, somebody's snot fell on that piece of foam. I don't know. I just can't. And this is how I know I'm old, because at one point, no, that's not true. I still want to go to a foam party because, I grew up in the 90s. That's one of those things where they have the foam machine and they, yeah, because I'm insane. But I'm sure there's also disgusting yuck in that foam. So
I could not imagine. Yes. If I need a band-aid. Ooh, yum.
COVID has changed. I can't believe before COVID, we used to blow out candles. And now I'm like, you put your breath over that. I'm like, I don't, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go back to equity. We know how we've defined it. So we need to connect it. And some of those words, when I was showing you that picture, we talked about, and let's go back to our pink here. We talked about PITI payments, which is principal. And so, okay, you know what? It's too early for all this spelling.
No worries, no judgment here.
Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And we get how this connects to that's your principal payment. When you make the payment, your equity goes up.
Hmm.
All right. And I mean, there's some things where, like, obviously this is important because we're talking about your money. I mean, what's more important than your money? Your health? I mean, like,
Hmm.
that's about it. Your family. So it's
Happiness.
important. Yeah, right. But other than that, family, health, and happiness, it's right up there on the list. So that's why. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't think I need to tell you why that's important. All right. You're good with that one?
Yes, I feel a lot better with
Yay.
that.
Ooh, here's a big one. I went big on this one. Dual agency. And I want to
Every time
rewind for a second. Before we go to dual agency, I am going to rewind because I just realized something. Do you know whether or not your state is a lien theory state or a title theory state?
I don't. I need to figure that out.
right?
I'm
And so
not
on
sure.
your side, wait, what state are you in again?
Idaho.
Idaho. Yeah, I got nothing. It's Idaho. Got nothing. You're gonna have to
I,
look that one up.
I live here and I'm just like, I don't know.
All right. Now we can go here to dual agency. And the reason that made me think of it is, I mean, obviously, I think we can agree that this belongs to the agency chapter.
hmm
But do you know, is dual agency legal in your state? Do you all practice dual agency, or can you not practice dual agency?
I would have to look into that. I'm not.
Okay. And well, that's okay. So that's what you can do is, and this is why I give you so much space on this other side, is just, pardon off some space here like this. And you say, is Idaho, oh, come on, dual agency? I love this program, but it is so sensitive. Okay.
I Googled it and Idaho is a title theory.
Oh, let's put that in our slides. So we can say, we'll put that in a different color. Idaho is title theory. There we go. All right. So, do you want to Google is Idaho dual agency?
Yes, I'll do that. Limited dual agency.
Okay, limited dual agency, which I think it's just a fancier way of saying dual agency. So, this is a big one. This is one of those things that you can't pay. You got to understand dual agency. And it's hard to put it in just 2 or 3 words. So tell me what you know and what you understand about dual agency.
I whenever I see this, I'm like, okay, duel, two, little fighting over. That's
Okay.
where my mind goes. So I'm like, okay, so isn't it an agent representing both sides of the transaction?
Yes. The agent, and let's be clear, the agent slash the broker represents both buyer and seller. Look at you getting answers right.
Yeah. I just think of a duel. I'm like, okay, there's two ends, and then yeah.
Hey, I love it. Now, why is this good or bad? Like, and this comes down to part of the importance. What does that mean? Why? Okay, the agent is gonna be representing both the buyer and the seller, the broker does. And so what? Who cares? Why is this even something we're talking about?
That's something both sides should know if they're both have the same agent representing
Why?
the. I just feel like I just I don't know. I put that into words because I know it's important. It's just
Well, you said in your state it's called what?
limited.
So let's talk about that word limited. What is limited?
Limit. Wouldn't it be how much the broke or not the broker, the agent or the broker can share?
Yes, you've got limited
Oh,
fiduciary. I hate spelling.
fiduciary.
Yeah, you got limited fiduciary responsibilities. It's limited. So, do you know what your fiduciary responsibilities are in just a normal, if you're just a buyer's agent or if you're just a seller's agent? Do you know what you owe, what you as an agent owe your client?
Confidentiality?
What did you have an acronym for this?
No.
Okay, you
But
can
I feel like
do,
there is one.
yeah, there are. There's old car
Oh, okay, yeah.
or there's loads, depending on what you did. Now, I'm going to go with loads because it's smaller. It's loyalty, obedience, accounting, disclosure, and skill, care, diligence. The C stands for confidentiality. So if you're learning loads, you just kind of put the confidentiality under loyalty or, whichever, but
Yeah.
see what that stands for. So that's what you would get if you are somebody's, buyer's agent or seller's agent, but all of a sudden it's limited in dual agency. Why? Because you're absolutely right. If you've got the buyer on one side and you've got the seller on the other side, well, there's going to be some information you can't tell. If you're the
Mm-hmm.
agent, you're in the middle. And
Yes.
now you can't tell the buyer that the seller would be willing to take 30,000 less than asking, because even
Mm-hmm.
though you're helping the buyer, you would be hurting the seller. And you can't tell the seller that the buyer would be willing to pay $40,000 more, because yeah, that helps the seller, but you are seriously hurting the buyer there. So you have
Yeah.
limited fiduciary responsibilities or capabilities in dual agency. And why would that be important? Because, like you said, it's limited. The buyer and seller need to know, hey, you're paying a commission, but you're not going to get the same things that you would get if you chose some kind of single agency.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Yes.
And just to throw in some other words here, you've got single agency, you got dual agency, and you've got designated. Do you know what designated agency is? Because I think it's important to talk about anytime you talk about dual agency.
I'm trying to put it into words.
That's okay.
Think
What if I put it
designated, I'm
into
like you're appointed to, or
yeah, I'm going to put it in a visual for you. Okay.
I do like my visuals.
Hey, I know you do, and I love that about you. So let's pretend this square is the transaction. And this transaction has a buyer and they have a seller. Now, I think it would be clear that in single agency, the buyer could hire XYZ as the broker or the company, and the seller could hire ABC. And then, of course, the company has there's X1 and here's X2. These are all agents that work for the company. Now, the truth is, maybe it's only this guy right here, X1, that is communicating. It's just an agent in the
Mm-hmm.
office that's communicating with the buyer. But the truth is, the broker was XYZ and X1's talking to them. But by common law of agency and all of that, even though X2 is not talking to the buyer every day, they're still part of the buyer's team. They're on the buyer side. That makes sense,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then at ABC, there'd be an A1 and there's an A2 and there's an A3 and there's an A4. And maybe A4 is the one that's talking to the seller, but that would be single agency because it's clear ABC is only working for the buyer, for the seller, and the buyer is XYZ. It's very clear whose team you're on.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we could have dual agency. And that means both of them have hired ABC. Right? Both teams have hired ABC, and that's better. That's darker. And this is where you have that limited fiduciary. In fact, I think it's kind of like you're more like a referee. You're kind of just making sure. In some states, dual agency or transactional brokerage kind of falls under this, where you're not really affecting the deal. Like just like in a football game, like we got all this football going on, and like basketball games where if the ref
Mhm.
makes a bad call, that's a problem. You're trying to keep things on a, just make sure we're all following the rules. So that
Yeah.
means every single agent that works for ABC, that's A4, that's A5, A6, A7, maybe A8. There could be 8 agents, and maybe A3 is talking to both the buyer and both the seller, but they're still going to stay neutral. You see how they're not on the field? There's this
Mhm.
line right here. They can't be given secrets or advice that's going to hurt or help somebody. Make sense?
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Well, here's where designated agency comes in, and I'll choose blue for this, and I'll make a little key here. In designated agency, the broker says, hey, A8, come on the field. You can give secrets. And advice to B. And you know what? A3, you get on this field. And now you can give secrets and advice to the seller. So even though all the other people in the firm are outside, they should not be involved in anything like that. In designated agency, this broker has said, look, seller, most of us are going to stay, kind of neutral, but we are going to assign one agent, A3 over here. We're going to assign them to help you as if you were in single agency. And you know what, buyer, I'm going to go ahead and give you A8. And now that agent is going to basically pretend they're in single agency. So they're going to keep your secret. And if they find out anything about the seller, A8 is going to tell you. Now, if
Mhm.
somebody else knows something about the seller, we're not telling you. But if A8 finds out something about the seller that would help you, they are totally telling it because they are team buyer. And the same
Okay.
thing with A3. If A3 finds out something about the seller, it's their job to keep it quiet. But if A3 finds out something about the buyer, like, oh, the buyer just won the lottery last night, we don't need to do repairs, they would totally tell the seller because they're team seller. And even if A3 knew the buyer won the lottery, well, let me take it this way. If A3 knew that the seller would take less, A3 could tell A4. They sure could tell A4, but guess what? There's a wall. Can A4 tell the buyer? Nope,
Nope.
because they're not on the playing field.
I like
Does
that.
that visual help?
Yes.
Yay!
Like putting
Not
into
very.
just like relating it to like wrestling and sports. It's like I love basketball, so I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense.
You
Love
mean I
it.
made it sticky in the foam pit?
Oh, it's so sticky.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So I think we're good on dual agency now.
Yes.
Yay. Let's do another one. Ooh, replacement cost. Any clue?
Definition or chapter?
Well, let's start with chapter.
Would this be in the financing category?
Would not be in the finance category, but you're not too far off. This is going to be in the valuation or appraisal category. Now, this one, I could define it, but I think if we're able to connect it first, the definition will make more sense, unless you know what the definition is off the top of your head.
I remember we talked about it, but I'm blanking. I'm just
That's
like, oh.
okay. That is okay. And this is why I love it. I'm glad you said that because, yeah, we may have talked about it, but what did we learn about the curve of forgetting?
Went
Don't
out.
forget it. right? Unless you review it, you're going to forget it. I'm sure when we talked about it, because we've done lots of sessions together, we talked about lots of stuff. So unless you reviewed that one piece of information, what are the odds, 30 days later that you remember it? Look, we can even see what the odds are. 30 days later, you only retained 20% of what we talked about that day, unless you reviewed it. So whenever you forget something, don't feel like, oh, I'm just so stupid, or I just can't. No, you might have known it that day. When I taught it to you, you did know it, but it's been
Yeah.
30 days. So, 80% of it had to go the wayside. But now we're going to review it. And so it's going to take you back up here.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about it. If I asked you, so let's kind of put it in the connection. It has to do with appraisals, valuation. There are 3 methods that an appraiser can use to find the value of a home. Do you know what those 3 methods are?
I just went over this last night. I was
That's okay.
reading this.
See if you can remember any of it.
Oh gosh. Why I don't. Three
You think you were
methods.
going to say something?
Huh?
I thought you were going to say a word. I thought I heard the beginning of a word.
Oh, I was just mumbling to myself. I'm like, come on, come on.
Well, you've got the sales comparison approach, otherwise known as the market data approach. You got the cost approach, and you've got the income approach. Do you happen to know which one replacement cost goes with? Take a wild guess. Replacement cost goes with which
Cost.
Hey,
Woo.
connects. Now, do you know what the cost approach? Well, I'll kind of define it because I'm going to make it shorter for you. In the cost
Okay.
approach, we don't have good comps. That appraiser doesn't have good comps. So they basically say, let's figure out what this would be, how much it would cost to rebuild the house. And once what we know it would cost new, since it's not new, we have to depreciate it. Kind of like if you took your car to CarMax. They know, hey, this car is 5 years old. And if it only had 20 miles and been sitting in grandma's, garage and hadn't gone anywhere, it's basically new. We know how much, with no mileage and perfect condition that car would be worth. But your car does not have 10 miles and is not in perfect condition. So what do? It's worth less. It depreciates it. What they do at CarMax to tell you what your value of your car is now used, that's what the cost approach is doing for houses. So when we talk about the cost approach, basically you have to rebuild and depreciate. And when you rebuild, you have to know, well, how are you going to rebuild it? Are you going to do replacement, or are you going to do reproduction? Does some of that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't remember, would you agree that replacement has a S? And I think S for similar.
Ooh, I like that.
So replacement, what we mean is, and I always give the example of my dad's house. It's about 100 years old. It's in downtown Detroit. If something had to happen, if something happened or he was trying to come up with a value, his house has plaster walls. When they decide how much it's going to cost to rebuild, they got 2 choices. Are they going to replace it with something similar with some drywall? Or are they going to go find out and first you better find somebody who even has the skill to do plaster walls. So a reproduction would be an exact copy. The replacement, you're finding similar. I mean, drywall, plaster, at the end of the day, you're covering the studs, man. How does that feel?
That feels good.
So if I were to define it, I'm going to say it is the similar and I hate to use the word replacement, the similar replacement in cost approach. Now, we know that there's the replacement and there's reproduction, but when they rebuild it, don't forget they have to know the money cost. And if we talk about that, you got 3 options here. You got the quantity survey method. You've got the good God, I can see it in my head. There's the square foot method. And then there's the unit in place method. So let's start with the first one, the square foot method. The square foot method is when it's kind of like when you go to new construction and they're like, these houses are about $130,000 a square foot. But there's a big difference if you want the nicest kitchen or if you want, the base level kitchen. It's going to vary, but it gives you a general idea. The unit in place method is when they go, okay, well, your kitchen's going to cost this much and your roofing's going to cost that much and your electricity's and your electric systems and your plumbing's going to be this much. So you're breaking it down by units, which is going to be a little bit more accurate than just saying a flat 130 per square foot, whether it's bathroom, kitchen, or basement, because obviously that's going to vary. And then the quantity survey method, I always joke, this is how you make your appraiser hate you, because they're like, it took 792 nails. You used 14 door knobs. Ain't nobody got time for that. But that would be the quantity survey method when they're giving you an exact cost plus the cost of labor and profit and everything. So when an appraiser is trying to figure out how they're going to rebuild, they need to know how and they need to know how much. And then there's 2 ways to depreciate. You could do the age life method, or this is where you have remember the physical deterioration, and you've got the functional, and then this is obsolescence, and then you've got economic obsolescence. And I'm not going to go over all of that right now because I know we're just about out of time, but does it help to see more than just the definition, but the where it kind of fits?
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, this is to help so much because I'm like, okay, now I could just chill when I'm making my flashcards and just deep breaths and not make it as complex.
Well, it shouldn't be one of those things where you just like definition word. If you're trying to get the most out of your studying, you're going to take, like we were going to do conventional loan next, but you'll do it. And then on your own, you'll break down, okay, what category does it belong in? Can I define it? How is it important? And how does it connect to other stuff? Because now you're not just learning one word, you're learning a concept. You're understanding a concept so you can get those questions right.
Makes so much sense.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always so happy. Like after our sessions, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Well, you know what I love is the fact that you understand our sessions are great, but then you also, I know that, and I know it's early there, but I also know how much you work outside of our sessions to get this information because it's a lot. Or I like to remind people, your favorite song, did you listen to that song once and memorize the lyrics?
No.
You listen to it literally hundreds of times on repeat, especially if it's your favorite sad song. You just curled up in a ball in your bed and listen to it on repeat.
You're just bawling. Yeah.
Or your favorite movie that you can quote. You didn't watch it once and you're able to quote it. You watched it over and over and over again, and it became part of who you are. I'm not quite sure why people think this information, you listen to it once or you hear it once or you read it once and all of a sudden it's supposed to stick in your head. It's like we were talking about earlier. You can't just know it once. You got to review it and review it and review it. So this helped?
So much. I have so many good
Yay!
notes.
And then what you can do is, as you're making your flashcards, let's say you get to Word and you're like, Candace, I know the definition of conventional loan, but it's not. Yeah, I'm having trouble understanding where it goes or why it's important or connecting it. Then when we
Mhm.
meet for our next session, we can be like, oh yeah, let's connect it this way, or let's do that, and that gives us more of a grounding for these questions because we know the questions just aren't what is a conventional loan. They're going to want
Yeah.
you to be able to apply it in different situations.
Yeah.
All right, ma'am. Well, thank you so much, and I will see you next time, okay?
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.